We get far enough now into the NHL season that a lot of teams that are off the slow starts are really starting to feel the pressure here. Today's question I'm going to pose to you is, which team is going to end up making the first coaching change? I'm going to give you my top 5 candidates coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. As I mentioned off the top here, teams are starting to feel the pressure that are off to a slow start here early into the NHL season. After watching last night's hockey game on CBC and Sportsnet, watching the second period intermission called Saturday Headlines, it was brought up by Nick Kyprios that a lot of teams might be looking to make a coaching change a little bit sooner into the NHL season than we've seen in the past. Quite often, American Thanksgiving is a little bit of a measuring stick for how teams are going to do throughout the year. As we know, from that point forward, a lot of teams in playoff positions usually do end up making the playoffs, or at least a high percentage of them do. And that's typically around the time that you do see some teams that are not doing as well as they'd like or off to slower starts sometimes make a coaching change or a big trade or kind of shake things up to try to improve things for the remainder of the season. So far, a lot of NHL insiders are getting the impression and feeling from certain clubs that that's not going to be the case this year. We might see some moves happen sooner than later. So let's take a look here at who I think feeling the most pressure. St. Louis Blues head coach Mike Yeo was a guy I mentioned in the first video a few weeks back, and I still will say the same. Mike Yeo and the St. Louis Blues have not had a great start, but the last couple games have been better. They just came off a big win against the Toronto Maple Leafs in Toronto here Saturday night with a 4-1 win, so that's certainly going to take the pressure off a little bit, but they still have a ways to go to build some consistency here. The last couple of games have been better for goalie Jake Allen. They've scored some more goals, so things do seem to be heading in the right direction for St. Louis. However, they're still off to a 2-3-2 start, so I mean that's not the way you want to get things going after all the offseason moves the Blues have made. Many people, myself included, expect this team to be greatly improved this year and at least be back into the playoff mix for sure. I don't necessarily see them as a top 3 team in the Central Division because there's a lot of tough competition there, but I do expect them to have a strong chance to make a wild card spot or at least be in that mix. So I do expect more things from the Blues, and I think depending on how things go here in the short term, Mike Yeo has a lot of pressure on him. After all the moves they've made in the offseason, they've tinkered with that roster quite a bit, and I think the next move that comes, if success isn't there, is the head coach. Now, one of the other names mentioned here in the segment last night on Saturday Headlines was the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, they're off to a 4-4 start, so not terrible, but certainly not fantastic either. The Flyers, just like the last couple of years, seem to be a little bit of a hot and cold team. You have nights when they look fantastic and win big, and they also have nights where they lose big. The goaltending has been inconsistent, as well as the defense. So there's no doubt they have some high-end forwards who can score some goals, but if they run into trouble, playing against strong defensive teams, and they don't get the defensive effort and goaltending from their own squad, then things tend to go awry. So there is a possibility here that Dave Haxtell's feeling some pressure. I don't think he's got as much pressure as some of the other guys here on this list, but I do think the Flyers are a team that's in a position where management and ownership want results, and they kind of want them sooner than later here. They did make another acquisition in the offseason, and James Van Riemsdyk, who unfortunately has been out injured for them. So that's not helping their cause, at least from the scoring standpoint right now. So I do think there's a possibility here. If the Flyers stumble too much, they could be looking for a change there. I don't think that one, though, is as imminent as some of the other ones here that we're going to discuss on today's list. Another team having a surprising, really slow start is the Florida Panthers. Now, going into this year, I would not have pegged head coach Bob Boughner as being a guy who's really under the hot seat and under a lot of pressure to get things going or be at risk of losing his job. Last year, the Florida Panthers barely missed the playoffs by one measly point. They have a strong team on paper. They were really injury-prone last year, had a lot of issues that way, especially in the net, but not to mention as well, some of their forwards were out significant periods of time too. So you kind of shake that all together and think, you know what, this team is still really strong on paper. They made a few different offseason moves as well, adding another sniper in Mike Hoffman. So, really this team is expected to take a step this year. Many people, myself included, really felt they had a strong chance to get back into the playoffs at the very least as a wild card team. I wasn't quite sure that they could contend with teams like the Leafs and the Lightning or even the Bruins in that Atlantic Division for a top 3 spot. However, I did expect him to be at least in contention for a wild card. And right now, things are not going well at all for the Florida Panthers. They have a record of 1 win, 2 losses, and 3 overtime losses, including another loss last night. The Florida Panthers just don't seem to have that killer instinct. They don't seem to be able to score that big timely goal. Dropping 3 games in overtime already. There's 3 points already that they left on the table here. So I do think there's a possibility here, because of the slow start and the expectations on this club, that Bob Boughner might actually have more pressure on him here than many people might have thought going into this season. Now, I don't think a coaching change will be as imminent as some of the other teams. Again, like I mentioned, same applies here. Like I mentioned here with Dave Haxtell, but I do see Bob Boughner of the Florida Panthers possibly feeling some pressure and maybe being in trouble if this drags on too long. I don't think a change there is very imminent, but it's a team to keep your eye on. That if they do struggle here in the next few weeks, wouldn't be a huge shock to me if a change is made. Now, one of the other teams, again, that we discussed in the video a few weeks back heading into the NHL season was Todd McLellan of the Edmonton Oilers. Now, the Oilers, I think, are under huge scrutiny here, not only by management, not only by their ownership, but by their fan base as well. I mean, it's getting frustrating for this club who's gone over, numerous number 1 overall draft picks. They've made some trades in the last few years. Last year was a bit of a disaster coming off the year before, which was a huge step in the right direction and getting back to the playoffs, making it to the second round, and they were pretty close to winning that round as well. So they weren't that far away from being a conference finalist team. To go from that to what they had last year and to get off to another slow start does not bode well for this team. Outside of Connor McDavid, who set a record, being a part of the team, so I think it was the first 9 goals. They just weren't getting much offense from other areas. Now, the last few games have been a bit better. They did suffer a shutout loss to the Predators last night, but prior to that, they had a little bit of a small winning streak together here. They had won 3 straight games. They now have a 3-3 record. The Oilers are one of the lower scoring teams in the league, but they've also played fewer games than most as well. So the Edmonton Oilers need to get things going. They got off to a slow start. They put together a small string of games here to kind of get themselves back to respectability. They were starting to see some goals from other areas. We finally saw a guy like Yamamoto get his first goal. The other lines were kind of pitching in a little bit more, so it wasn't all McDavid. He was still a big part of it, mind you, but not quite as much as he had been in the games prior to that. And then they followed it up at home again with a shutout loss to the Predators. Now, the Preds are a strong team. The fact that they lost the game isn't necessarily that detrimental, but it's still another mark in the loss column for them. They got shut out, couldn't get together any goals. But because of last year and the slow start this year, if they continue to stumble, I don't think the Oilers are going to be waiting too long to make a change. And I do think Todd McLellan probably takes the fall first before anybody else. Now, right now, the coach, I think, with the most pressure on him right now is LA Kings head coach John Stevens. Now, this team is a team that went into the playoffs last year as a playoff team, as a wildcard team, faced the Vegas Golden Knights and got swept. Now, the big thing with the Kings last year in the playoffs, in my opinion, is they were too slow. They could not keep up with a high, fast-paced Vegas Golden Knights, and that was a huge part of why they lost that series. They just could not keep up. In my opinion, they do have some good players on that team. They have some good, strong pieces. Jonathan Quick's an excellent goalie. They have, one of the top D in the league with Drew Doughty. They have some strong forwards too. So overall, there's a lot to like in a sense. But going into the offseason, I thought they really need to focus on getting quicker, faster, playing with more pace. And the only major move they really made in the offseason was bringing in Ilya Kovalchuk. Now, I'm not going to say that they're off to a slow start because of him. He hasn't done too bad. He's got 2 goals and 3 assists, so for 5 points in 8 games. Not awesome, but it's not terrible either. Puts him on pace for around 22, 23 goals, I believe is what that computes to when you prorate it to 82 games. I know I've had people asking me leading into it, do you think Kovalchuk can get 30 to 40 goals, 35? What are your thoughts? I honestly thought 30 was a stretch. I thought 20 to 25 was probably more realistic. And I wasn't a huge fan of that contract that he was given in the summertime. But we'll see here. I think overall the Kovalchuk experiment's still early, and I think he's doing okay. But the fact is, yes, he can score. He's got a good shot. He's proven so far he can still play. He's looked decent. However, I'm not really convinced that he was exactly what that team needed. They need some forwards and some D who can play at a faster pace game. In my opinion, they're just not quick enough, and that's a huge part of what's going on here. Now, they've had some injuries. Dustin Brown's been out. Jonathan Quick missed some time. You take a look at Anze Kopitar so far, not at the pace he was at last year. Last year, you had Kopitar and Brown bounce back to career-type seasons. So far, we haven't had that at all because Brown has been out. Kopitar's got 2 goals in his first 8 games and no assists. So that's a slow start for Kopitar based on a 90-plus point performance last season for sure. They have now lost 4 straight games, the last couple at home against some teams that they probably should have been expected to win against. They lost against the Buffalo Sabres. And head coach John Stevens was asked, where's the fight in this team? And all his response was, it's missing. It's missing. He doesn't have a lot of answers right now, and I do think this team's expected to win. They did have a players-only meeting after their most recent loss for about 20 minutes. There really hasn't been made public yet a whole lot of what was said. We may not really know. Obviously, they're frustrated and trying to figure this out themselves. But you can't help but wonder if John Stevens might have lost that room, if the message is not getting clear here. They're not executing the systems that he's set in place here to their fullest extent. So I personally think the LA Kings are a team that was expected to at least contend for a top 3 spot in their division. I do think the LA Kings, it's fair to say, should be a playoff team. And right now they are at the bottom of the league, the lowest scoring team. The only team that has scored fewer goals than the LA Kings is the Edmonton Oilers. But the Oilers have played 2 fewer games. So if you prorate that out, the Oilers would actually have more goals per game than the LA Kings. They're scoring fewer than 2 goals per game. They got 8 games played, and they've scored 15 goals. There's a lot of things that need improvement on this LA Kings team, and I think John Stevens has the most pressure, and if things don't improve sooner than later, I think he could be the first to take the fall here and unfortunately lose his head coaching position with the LA Kings. Now, there's some very key guys out there looking for coaching positions, including a very experienced guy in Alain Vigneault, who's collecting a big paycheck right now from the New York Rangers to not coach them and just waiting for work. I do think he might be one of the first guys, if not the first guy, to take a position here with one of the teams, whoever makes that first move. Most of the hirings we saw over the summer were some newer coaches, first-time NHL guys, some guys coming from the college ranks like David Quinn, Jim Montgomery. So I do think now, if teams are going to be doing something in season, it's more likely going to be somebody who has past prior experience. And I think Vigneault is probably safe to say one of the top guys on the market right now looking for a position. So we'll see what happens. But of course, as always, I want to hear your comments down below. Who do you think is going to be the first NHL team to make a coaching change? Do you think one of the 5 I've mentioned here today who has a lot of pressure will be the first to do it? And if so, who do you think would be a good replacement? If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.